Was around 4.5 years old when my first memories of alien abduction began. I lived in Marin County, California, in Lucas Valley, actually, and our house was located 7 miles by crow flight from the George Lucas Ranch, literally right over the mountains from us. And, well, I lived in that house with my brothers, my sister, and my mom and my dad. It was an Eichler home, and that home had an inner atrium. When you walked in the front door, there was an open roofed area, like an atrium where you could grow your plants and flowers off to the side, and there's concrete. And it was really quite nice. And you went through sliding glass doors to go into the house, and then on the other side, the whole back side of the house is glass. And it was really a cool house, actually, and I really liked that house as a kid. But in the summer months, my mom and dad, summer, spring, my mom and dad, when it was nice nights, let us sleep out there because they felt secured with the locked door there, let us sleep out in that atrium. And that's what we did. We'd just set cots out there, and my brothers would sit there and talk about the stars. We'd look out at the stars at nighttime while falling asleep, and they'd usually tell me to be quiet and just listen, that I didn't know anything. And of course, they didn't know much either. But they talked about the Big Dipper, the Little Dipper, and all the different things that they thought they knew about our solar system. Anyway, the other subject that was broached many times was the sound of crickets. And I remember my older brother telling me that the crickets were actually guards, that when they were noisy, you knew everything was okay. As long as you heard the chirping of the crickets, you knew everything was cool and nothing was approaching. But if they got silent, if they became silent, then you knew something was approaching. So I'd go to sleep with that every night. I'd hear the crickets chirping and knowing everything was okay. And every once in a while they'd stop, and I'd wake up and I'd look at the top of the atrium where the roof is, and I'd see a cat or something, a possum or cat or what have you, coming across there, and I'd fall back asleep. And well, one night my brothers and sisters were talking, and I fell asleep first, and they all fell asleep, and then I don't know exactly what time it was. I honestly don't. I can't say. I only know it had to be wee hours in the morning as a little kid. All I remember is the crickets became silent while I was sound asleep, and I opened my eyes and looked up at the top of the atrium like I usually do, looking for a cat or whatever up there, and there was none. I go, huh. So I laid back down, went back to sleep. In a matter of moments, I felt like a presence. That's the best way to describe it. I felt like a presence next to me, and I opened my eyes and I rolled my head left like that. And standing next to me were 3 hooded beings. They had parts of their faces were exposed. All I could see were parts of their faces. They had dark hoods over their heads, which I thought peculiar and startling. I remember being petrified of them. I remember wetting my sleeping bag and my pajamas. I remember saying, "Who are you? What do you want?" And they said, "We're your parents." And I said, "You're not my parents. My parents are inside the house sleeping." They said, "No, those are your guardians while you're here, but we are actually your parents, and we're going to be taking you with us, and we'll bring you back." And the next thing I remember is just passing out. I just freaked and passed out. And in the morning, I wake up, and my brother's it's probably, I don't know, it was Saturday morning, because I know my dad was off work, and it's probably about 8 o'clock or something like that, thereabouts, and I went in the house, and Dad was the first one awake, and I remember being a little kid, and he was making breakfast, whatever it was he was making, because Mom was sleeping, because she worked late nights in restaurants and did cocktails, and he saw my pajamas, they're all wet. He said, "You wet your pajamas." And he was just furious about me wetting my pajamas. And he said, "You better not wet that sleeping bag." He said, "Those are brand new, just bought them." And he was just, I said, "Dad, who were those men that came in the atrium last night?" And he goes, "What men? What men came in the atrium?" And I said, "I don't know, some men came in the atrium." And he said, "What are you talking about?" I said, "Some men, they came in the atrium." He said, "What did they look like?" I said, "I don't know, they were just little short guys, and they had hoods over their heads." When I think back on them, they were probably about, I don't know, they weren't very tall. If I looked over, if I looked to my left and could see them standing, I don't know, either they were kneeling or they were extremely short, because the chase lounge isn't very high off the ground, and they seemed to be eye level with me from this chase lounge, literally, maybe a little taller, but not much else. So they were either kneeling somehow under the robes, or they were literally that short. And I told him, I said, they're just little short guys. And I said, they took me with them, and then brought me back. And he had a really puzzled look on his face, like startled. I think probably the first thing that went through his mind was maybe it was some sort of burglars or something like that coming in, kidnappers or what have you. And the first thing he said is, "You're not sleeping out there again." And it became the whole issue of my wet pajamas, the wet sleeping bag, me not sleeping out there, and when every time I tried to talk about the guys that came in there, he didn't want to talk about it. He just didn't want to even broach the subject. I think he was terrified of whatever it was, and I could see by the look in his face, it's like almost he had some recollection or understanding of what it was, but wasn't sharing it with me. But who knows, really? I don't know, but that's what it seemed like to me as a kid. But I just, from there on, I wasn't really able to talk to him about it. And that's most of my memory from what I remember in that particular instance.